Welcome back. This is Program 5, Video 2. All right, so now let's start doing our functions. So we have our greeting function, so I'm going to take this function prototype and make my definition down here. Remember to remove the semicolon here and make a block of code. So in here I'm going to greet the user. I'm going to leave that up to you to what you want to say. I'm just going to put a printf in here. Obviously, you should put more information than that. And now I'm going to call this function. Actually, I'm going to just comment that out right now. I'm going to call this function, put the function call here to greet the user, and test to make sure that it's working as expected. All right. Greet the user. So it is working as expected. So now it's time to do my next function. Actually, I can ask and get the current ID here first. Printf, enter ID, scanf, %d, into address of student ID. All right, so now I'm going to have this ID. This ID is going to be passed to some of my functions, so I want to get the current ID of the student. I also have this, the next thing I'm going to do is implement my display menu function. You don't have to call it display menu. As a matter of fact, I prefer that you come up with your own names for your functions. So down here, I can put my function definition for my display menu function. All right, so let's get rid of that. All right, so this function is going to declare a character, a local character, so char input. And then it's going to printf. Now here's where you're going to say enter A, whatever. So enter A, N, C, or Q. Obviously you need to do a better job than me. Then you're going to scanf. Remember to put the space %C. The space is very important. So don't forget to do that into address of input. And then you're going to return. This is just like you already did in the other one. I think only in the other one it was a number, an item number. So this time we're practicing with a character. So this function, you're going to display menu. This is the function. You declare a character. You tell them what to enter. You scan in that value, and then you return it. So now we're going to call this function. So here we're going to call this function. This is the function call. The function will get called, and it's going to return a character. So we need to have a character to capture what's being returned. So we're going to return it here to this variable called menu, and then we want to print to make sure that it's working as expected. The character entered was %C. So again, this is very important to understand. This is the purpose of this assignment, is to practice functions. So you have your prototype up here for your display menu function. This display menu function displays the choices, gets the choice, and returns it as a character. When that choice gets returned here from the function call, it will get assigned to this. So the main function will have a copy of the character. So this is the function definition. Declares the character. You can name this menu or input, it doesn't matter. It's a local variable. You ask the user for what you want. You scan it in, you return it. The data type of the return type here matches the data type of the return type of the function, and then that function will then take that character and assign it to the menu variable. Now we can test to make sure that that works. And enter this is the student ID, and enter A. The character entered was A. So I feel confident that that works. So now we're ready to do our loop. So our loop here is going to check. We're going to get the character. You don't really need to, you can comment that out now if you want to, or you can leave it there. It doesn't matter. So we're going to get the character. We're going to make sure that the character is not a Q. If the user enters a Q, this loop is going to stop. So let's test it now and see what happens. Enter Q. Thank you and have a great day. Now let's test it and see what happens if we don't enter a Q. All right, so if we don't enter a Q, we have an infinite loop. Now the reason we have an infinite loop is because we have this is the initialization for the loop. Initialization for the while loop. And we have the test here for the while loop. But we need to have an update. So in order to update, we need to have get another letter, because eventually the user needs to enter a Q to stop it. So here they enter it. If they enter a Q, we will not go in the loop. If they enter anything other than Q, we will go in here. So we need here to do the update. So now let's make sure it's working as expected. So I'm updating right here at the end of the while loop. See, this is where my while loop ends. This is the curly brace of my while loop. This is the curly brace of my main function. So let's check again. Enter the ID, enter E, enter S, enter A, enter Q. Q stops, so I'm very happy about that. So moving on, now it's time to add the if conditions. So we're going to, here, if they enter an N, that means they have a new student. So if they enter N and they have a new student, you're going to set the points to 0, set the count to 0, and you're going to get a new student ID for your new student. Okay, then the other one, okay, else if, all right, so if they enter, our other options are A, and let's put our curly braces. What happens if they enter an A? We also have a C, and actually I think that that's all we care about, right? If they enter an A or a C, or else the letter is not recognized. Printf. Okay, the letter is not recognized. Whatever, you can say whatever you want. Recognized. All right, so now we need to test this, but I'm going to add printfs for each of these. So if they enter an A, I'm going to print I'm going to print just as feedback to see if it's working, add, and if they enter C, obviously we haven't done these functions yet, but that's okay, calculate. All right, so now let's go through our main function. We have this menu variable, and we have count and points, which we're not really using yet because we haven't started any calculation yet. We're going to greet the user. We're going to get the first student ID. The user's going to give us a letter. If the user gives us a Q, we're not even going to go in the while loop. If the user gives us anything other than a Q, we're going to test. If we get an N, we're going to reset the points and count to 0 and get a new student ID. If we get an A, we're going to print the word add onto the screen and call the add function. Obvious. And we're also going to add 1 to count, right? If you add points, you're going to add 1 to count. So actually we could do this here. Count equals count plus 1. All right, so here, if they enter a C, we're going to calculate, so we're going to call the calculate function, which we haven't implemented yet. All right, so then if they enter any other letter besides a Q, A, N, or C, we're going to tell them the letter is not recognized, and then we're going to print the count onto the screen to keep track of it, and now we're going to get another letter. So let's make sure that that works. All right, succeeded. All right, 2, 2, 2. All right, if I enter A, count is 1 because I will have added 1. A, count is 2. A, count is 3. C, count is still 3. C, count is still 3. A, count is 4. N, count should go back to 0. New ID, and count went back to 0. A, Q, quit. All right, so far it's working as expected. We just have 2 more functions to implement. So the first one is function 3. You're going to input the points and you're going to input the ID. The reason that you're inputting the ID is just so you can say, like we did in the sample output, for user ID number. It's just for the printf for the prompt. Then you're going to get the points to add it to the points that were sent, and return the result as a double. So we're going to do this function. I'm going to call this the add function, and I'm going to call this is the calculate function. Okay, the add function is going to be called when the menu option is add. You're going to call the add function here. The calculate function is going to be called here. Right? So now we have these 2 functions. Let's do the implementation for them, and I'm going to leave it up to you to figure out how to call them. All right, so we'll first do the add. The add function is pretty self-explanatory. You printf for %d student, enter the points. So you're going to, that's the student ID. So you're going to do a scanf for the points, %lf. We need to have a variable for that. Double add points. Okay. And you're going to return the points that came in here plus the add points. Okay, so here's the thing. We said that we want to make sure that the points are in the range between 0 and 100. So in order to enforce that, I'm going to add a do while here that says do right? So you're going to ask for the points, get the points. So what do we want to make sure? We want to make sure that the points are not less than, so we're going to put here, okay, while the add points are less than 0, or add points are greater than 100. So what's going to happen here is you're going to ask for the points. If they enter a negative number, that's going to make this true. If they enter a number over 100, then that's going to make this true. So you're going to enforce that you get the points and the points are in the right range. That way you also make sure that you actually get points because you're updating your count back here in your main function and you don't want to add one to count if the user doesn't give you any points. So if they give you 0 points, actually it could be a 0. They could have a 0 for that assignment. So it should be, yeah, 0 is okay. If they put is 0 less than 0, that's false. 0, yeah, so 0 is okay. Okay, so a 0 is okay and a 100 is okay. All right, so that's the add points. I'm going to leave it up to you to test it. And you're going to call it here. So you're going to have to figure out how to call that. You're going to call it right here. You're going to have to figure out how to call that function. All right. Then the last function is the calculate function, which is going to be called right here. So let's figure out how to call the calculate function. How to implement the calculate function. All right, so this function takes the points, takes the count, and takes the current ID. The reason it takes the current ID, again, is only for the printf. Doesn't really have to have the current ID, but you're going to print it onto the screen. So what you're going to do is you're going to check that it's not 0. So if the count is equal to 0, you're going to do something. Print a message, tell the user to enter A. All right. So if it's not 0, if count is not 0, then you're going to, and I'm going to leave this up to you guys to do too. Well, it's not hard. Okay, so if it's not, then you're going to calculate and print the average. Calculate and print the average, and you'll also use the current ID. So the average is going to be just points divided by count, and you use the current ID in your printf to have a better experience for the user. All right, so hopefully this helps you to complete program 5. If you have any questions, be sure not to wait until the last minute. And I hope you guys have fun doing this assignment.